Hey guys, this is going to Sky here with another Guardian Tales video. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the top tank heroes here in Guardian Tales. And also, I'm going to link up here in the corner. Last video, we did the best healers here in Guardian Tales. So I feel like this is a really good transition because what I probably should have done, one of these tanks here in Future Princess is also one of the best healers. So she not only is she going to make the list as easily the best tank in the game, but she's also easily one of the best healers in the game because of how her kit works. And so she's making the list as the #1 tank hero here in Guardian Tales. This is probably the #1 hero must pull. Like if there's ever a must pull / must own character here in Guardian Tales, it would be Future Princess here. She should have gotten an honorable mention on the best healers, and she's getting the #1 spot as the #1 tank. And so a lot of people, if you're trying to follow and get advice for Guardian Tales, a lot of people say get Future Princess, and I'm going to try to explain why she's so good. We already know she's a good healer, and if you look at the healing throughput that she does, it's about half as much as like Maya, maybe even like a third as much as Maya, but still, the fact that it's even comparable and she's a tank is crazy. Let's read off her kit here. So she has her auto attack, Dimension Breaker, either inflicts range damage with the staff or inflicts melee damage with the staff, and a shield both equipped. No one uses the staff version, it's just the staff plus shield version of her. That's the, I've tested it. I think a lot of people have tested it. I don't think I've ever seen someone use the staff version of Future Princess. So then she has a taunt. Taunts nearby enemies. It increases nearby allies' defense by 30%. So but for 5 seconds, it's a crazy big stat boost, especially in like Coliseum. It's going to be the weapon skill here. Creates a giant tempest of times its space, puts enemies in injured state. So this is really big. The weapon skill is just a massive... she has like the best weapon skill in the game, because in PvP, if she hits all the ticks, she's going to immediately put them in an injured state, whereas most characters need either 2, and then some characters need 3. Like Eugene needs 3 to actually hit it. So she has a long cooldown time, but it doesn't matter because it's such an impactful thing in Arena and in Coliseum. And then also in all other game modes, this is going to be not only something that puts them in an injured state, but it's a really good CC method to really prevent damage. It's a really wide range. It's just literally the most you could ever ask for in a weapon skill. It's right here. It's by far probably the best weapon skill in the game. And in those game modes like Coliseum and Camazon Zone or Camazone, the first character is the one that uses the weapon skill. So you're going to want to put the best weapon skill in the front. That's why she is so commonly chosen as a leader, because not only is she tanky and she's getting a ×8 boost to her stats in those game modes, but she's having the best weapon skill as well. And then the chain skill is creates a barrier for all allies that negate all damage for 3 hits. This is LD player. You know, these if you're wondering why these numbers are in the way, it's because of LD player. And then from enemies for 20 seconds and restores HP by 10%. A massive heal and negates damage of 3 hits. So it could be the most massive hit, or it could be like a machine gun. It doesn't matter. It's 3 hits. And then it lasts for a very long time. So you can cast it if you're doing like PvE content. You cast it in one room, you could go to the next room. It's just a very good ability. And I believe this carries over if you activate this in Arena. Like you kill a guy, you activate this, and then it goes to the next round. I believe this is on there that stays for 20 seconds into the next match. And then special ability on hit increases movement speed, weapon skill regen speed, Dimension Breaker's attacking speed by 20% for 2 seconds. So it's just a crazy special ability. She's actually like essentially everywhere. The only place that she's not used is raids. That's it. Literally the best character in the entire game except raiding. Easily makes this list as the best tank hero in the game. Hopefully that kind of clears up why she's so sought after. You absolutely do need the exclusive weapon for her though, and because we have Tempest time and space, creates a giant Tempest of time, and then puts enemies in injured state. And then also on hit inflicts 30% of DPS by 30% chance, restores all allies HP by 2%. This is what is causing such a awesome heal for your team. You got the chain skill, and you got the 2% HP heal every single auto attack. So amazing character. Easily is the #1 tank hero on this list. And now let's talk about the next one. It's going to be Ogma. And here, let's actually... Okay, so now that we got Future Princess out of the way, this is in no particular order. Going forward, no particular order. So Ogma, what makes Ogma so good is, let's talk about, he has a very unique kit in the sense that he is... Let's just go over his kit like normal, and I'll talk about the best parts of him. And actually, I do need to go to the book here. I don't have him maxed. He has the normal attack. Heat Blade beats enemies with Heat Blade, so nothing special there. The taunts enemies around. Defense increases by 50% for 3 seconds. So amazing. It's a bigger percentage boost, but Future Princess does everyone's defense by 30% heal. He does only himself, but 50% increase. And he has a higher defense amount. And then he has the chain skill, launches multiple rockets to inflict range damage with 240% of DPS and decreases enemies attack by 10% for 15 seconds. So that's really helpful for PvE content where they do a ton of damage. It's just a solid chain skill. And the 240% of DPS is probably one of the weakest hitting ones in the game, just because he has almost he doesn't do any damage. So it's not about the damage, there's just about the utility and being able to CC them. And then the injured actually does damage in PvP. And then lastly, the special ability, this is what really makes him shine here, is enhances defense of party members who have lower defense than his, and essentially everyone does. And then party members' defense increases by 15% of the difference between Ogma and their defense. It applies prior to party effect. So amazing special ability there. What makes Ogma so good is you can splash him into your team and then everyone gets tankier just from his presence. And he has a really good taunt and he himself is crazy tanky with his stats. So it's just, you don't need to put him as your lead like Future Princess. You could just throw him in. And he has good typing because a lot of the hard PvE content, there's a lot of basic heroes. So it's Future Princess could get nuked. You could put him in there and he will not only be tankier himself, but then have the correct typing as well to help you out with the hardest affinity for Future Princess. So there we go. There we got Ogma. He's also really good in Arena. He's actually kind of interesting how you play him because his like best weapon is his health bar. So you kind of like kite people and you try to use the chain skill. And I really like his weapon skill, I should say, because it follows people around and then you can like CC them. You can like throw that out and then run around. And then you're trying to time people out with him for the most part, and then getting boxes and stuff. Like he's so tanky that depending on the matchup, he could literally just sit there and then just eat the damage, get you weapon boxes. So he's probably fallen out of the meta when it comes to PvP. It's because there's so many light characters, but he still is a very good character that if a lot of good basic heroes come through, I can see him coming back through the arena meta. Still very popular in Coliseum and essentially a must-have if you ever want to progress through really hard PvE content. He's like super necessary for that. There's one more thing we need to talk about when it comes to Ogma. He also has a very interesting exclusive weapon. So first thing is returns part of the afflicted damage to the attacker in proportion to Ogma's defense 1 second cooldown time. So he's constantly, as he takes damage, he reflects it back. That's an amazing thing for PvP. It's pretty solid for other game modes. That's where a lot of his damage comes from. It's just really nice that he's so tanky. He's taking, you want him to take as much damage as possible, and he's able to reflect that back to the attacker. And also really oppressive from a perspective of you could really snowball an arena match where if the guys try to come back, it kind of shuts the door down on that because he might have like a DPS character, and you're even if you're not like actively trying to kill him, he's always going to be damaging himself. So depending on the matchup and how it ends, he could just like lock himself out, because even if he tries to kill you, he's going to kill himself in the process. So it's kind of when you're winning with Ogma, it's like you're really winning with Ogma. And another thing to keep in mind when this is fully max limit broken, he actually increases his defense by 10% instead of attack. There's very few characters that have something that's other than plus 10 attack. So plus 10 defense is going to actually be insane for someone like him. So just keep that in mind if you ever, you could farm this. This is possible. There's videos out there on how to farm this. I haven't done one myself. There's a really good video by Harmonix, I believe, that talks about how you can actually farm weapon material. So it's like when you see this is something to keep in mind. Here, let me duck down. When you see something like the fully max limit broken, this is not something that's crazy unobtainable. Eventually you could get this if you want to. So I'll be sure to do a video on this myself, but the main Harmonix already has a video about how to farm magic metals to be able to limit break weapons. So that's why I wanted to talk about this. Okay, now let's talk about the next hero, and it's going to be Noxia. So I also don't have her max. So here, let's actually go back to the book. Let's break down her kit really quick. So Spirit Orb launches Spirit to enemy and inflicts range damage and restores Dark Spirit's HP by 20% of the damage inflicted. Summons a spirit that follows Noxia, and Ether afflicts melee damage or taunts nearby enemies. Okay, so I had to change scenery here really quick, but hopefully it's not too distracting. Continuing with Noxia here, the reason why she's so good, and I really wanted to make sure I wasn't rushed when I was talking about her, because there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to this particular character. So she has, and also I'm using the site here, heavenhold.com. It's actually pretty sweet when it comes to like looking at stuff. I think they're probably a work in progress, but a pretty useful resource when it comes to actually like looking at characters if you don't want to be in game when you're looking at this kind of thing. Yeah, I'm recording on my phone, so I was like, how am I going to play the game?
this website's actually pretty good at that. So, okay, first thing, her auto attack Spirit Orb launches Spirit to enemy and inflicts range damage, and restores Dark Spirit's HP by 20% of the damage inflicted. And then Summon Spirit summons a spirit that follows Noxia. Dark Spirit only appears during battle, and Dark Spirit either inflicts melee damage or taunts enemies nearby. So it's like she has this extra tank there. Very unique mechanic, very useful. Like she's by far S tier in Colosseum, and she's very similar to Ogma in the sense that you don't want her as the main lead. You can just throw her in. She's very splashable. And then another thing too on a tank, this is she's the first one that I can think of when it comes to a tank perspective where her trigger on her chain skill is on all, and it goes airborne. So she has the best, in my opinion, best status effect that she's going into on the chain effect. Not only does it trigger off anything, which automatically is amazing, but then she's putting them in airborne. And in Colosseum, you need to do a ton of damage with range. You always have to have a range character on the team. So she's doing range damage, she's putting people in range damage. It's just insane. So that's why like people like MK99 and Gabriel are doing all this crazy damage, because it's just all triggering on all, not all of them, but like at least two people are triggering on all, and they're constantly getting put into airborne. And then inflicts 250% DPS range damage to the enemy with a myriad of spirits. When Dark Spirit is summoned, inflicts 250% of DPS extra melee damage. So she's splitting the types of damage, which is nice. Even though, like, I think why they did that is because if they went all airborne with it, I think it just would have been too much damage. It would have hit like an absolute truck, putting him into airborne and then having this joint attack of melee plus spirit, and plus it just makes, or a ranged plus melee. I think it just makes sense thematically that one's doing range, one's doing melee, but from a balanced perspective as well, it just would have done a crazy amount of damage if it was not both like that. Then lastly, increases Dark Spirit's attack by 40% and restores Noxia's HP by 40% of the damage inflicted by Dark Spirit. So she's passively healing as well. So like pretty much every character this way, the main meta team in Colosseum is so oppressive right now. It's like it's so good with Noxia, Gabriel, MK99, and Future Princess. Like all the right typing, all heal themselves. Something that, but that's getting beside the point. Her as a character specifically is just amazing because of how versatile she is, how she doesn't need to be the lead, how she's giving 40% HP party buff to everyone, how she puts people in airborne. Just a very good character for specifically for this, and she's really good in arena. And tanky effects or tanky party buffs are usually pretty good in arena. She has good typing. Well, I wouldn't say she has good typing in arena. Dark, there's a lot of light characters, but I think it really speaks to just how good the dark characters are that they have, that they're going up against Future Princess, but these dark characters are still highly viable, because I think the dark characters, if there was no party buffs or anything, I think there would be some of them, if there was no status, if there's no type disadvantage, I feel like the dark characters are some of the best characters in the entire game. It's just they get put in check by the best character in the game in Future Princess. So without her there, keeping in check Dark would just run rampant, is kind of my prediction here. And I'm saying that to just kind of talk about just how good dark characters are, and specifically Noxia. Then lastly, we got her weapon skill here, which is on hit inflicts 40% of DPS range damage with 40% chance, and Dark Spirit taunts inflicts and 100% DPS melee damage. So adding more damage to the taunt is really nice. And there's a lot of like extra effects when it comes to weapon skills like that make the taunt actually do damage. Like Marina is a good example of that, and it's actually a really good effect. So in hers, I believe, is only like 30%, whereas it's 100% of DPS with Noxia here. So amazing character, good in arena, good in Colosseum, good in all the PvE content. The only thing she's just like Future Princess, the only thing she's not good at is raiding. That's it. And for 90% of people, not being good at raiding is who cares when she's amazing in literally most of the content that matters, unless you're really trying to min-max and get into a high level guild. So easily an S tier character in this game, right up there with Future Princess, right up there with Ogba. I would say she's, if I had to rate these, even though this is not in order, definitely Noxia is going to be the priority. Noxia is really good, and Future Princess are going to be the two priorities for sure out of the list of three here. But if you already are invested in Ogma, or you're currently investing in Ogma, never stop your farms. Always keep going, because Ogma is still an incredible character that's worth investing in. And then now that we got Noxia out of the way, I feel like those three tanks are on their own level when it comes to just how good they are in the game. I feel like they're in a complete class of their own. But there is a couple tanks I want to talk about, and just in case these are the only characters you have, they're still good. They're just clearly just not on their level. It's just not comparable. But they are still good characters. And the first one, which is crazy for me to say this, especially if you watch any tier lists from when the game came out, but Marina. Marina is still a very good character. She's water typing. She has the HP party buff, but main thing about her is let's break down her kit, and I'll talk about her. Her auto attack cuts through enemies with a large weapon, and then pulling throws an anchor and taunts distant enemies. She can also pull weak monsters with the anchor. So this anchor is really useful in arena and really useful in Coliseum. Being able to taunt people. You really want to have your your tank character have a good taunt. Even if it has a really low range or something like that, it'd be bad. But especially in arena, it's a really useful move to have such a tanky character have this really oppressive, high damaging ranged move. That was one of the main things that made her so good, and it's really frustrating trying to deal with her because you can kite, you can like throw it out, and then it does actually decent amount of damage if you're kind of a squishy character. So it's really tough to beat. And I think characters nowadays are just better when it comes to in arena, but she's still one of the best characters in the game. And Lynn is a really popular character. She kind of checks her. I think it speaks to just how good Lynn is. That I've had situations where it's like I've been able to beat Marinas. I don't know how well that player played it, or how if I like super out leveled that person. But the fact that like Lynn is even comparable really speaks to how good Lynn is. But at this, she has the type of advantage of her. Mayriel's kind of taken over in the meta right now, so she's actually kind of in a bad spot. Mayriel's going to completely wreck her. But from an arena perspective, but from a tank progression, clearing content, early Coliseum, like she's gonna do well. Like I see Marina's in Master Tier, with the correspondingly well geared down to other characters, but just because you're leveling her now doesn't mean you need to stop. She's still really good. And then she has the trigger. She actually triggers on all, which I think is actually pretty sweet. And then it looks like maybe that's like a common thing when it comes to tanks. And then she goes into injured, and then inflicts 150% DPS to enemies and creates 20% water shield around all party members. And then one-on-one battle, when using the pulling skill, defense increases by 30%. This is a very common thing when it comes to tanks, where their tank ability also gives them extra defense. So she's getting extra defense as she's doing this ranged move, which I think is really sick. It's not common to have a ranged tank taunting ability that's also giving you extra stats. And then she has the HP increase, and then the weapon regen speed on her passives. And then lastly, her exclusive weapon here, which is it actually gives a pretty decent amount of critical chance at 15%. And then pulling skill inflicts 150% DPS to a wider range. So I was wrong on that. I thought it was 30%. It's actually even more than Noxia, so that's what makes it so good. And then even if it did like 100%, the damage doesn't necessarily make it good. What makes it good is that she's a tanky character that has not only melee but ranged, and having that combination is really nice to have. And then lastly, her weapon skill is actually pretty sweet. Like when it comes to just how big of an area it is, it's really nice to be able to have such a wide-ranging move there. If you're going to be like using her as like the lead or something, if you don't have Future Princess, so it's just crazy to me just how good of a character she is. But she gets replaced by Future Princess in pretty much all situations. So. But one thing though is you really want to make sure you're continuing farms. If you're like a newer player and you're having Marina and everyone's saying how much better Future Princess is, and you already have her like halfway to 5-star, finish your farm on Marina and then maybe consider going back to Future Princess way down the line or something like that. It's just better to finish farms in this game because the characters are really only useful when you fully max limit break them. And so if you're constantly bouncing around the meta, you're never going to catch up. And then lastly, when it comes to the 10 characters, I think Craig deserves a mention. Definitely not on the level of these characters, but it's still a good character and a natural 2-star. So this is really good for people that are going through progression and they have a lot of Earth characters. This is going to be one of the best possible 2-stars for progression to have. Because he's just actually legitimately a good tank. It's just these other tanks that are, natural 3-stars should be better. And so he has his auto attack here attacks with one-handed sword and shield, and then area taunts all enemies nearby. His trigger, he goes from down to airborne, which is nice. Like another example of a tank popping people up with the back row. And then battle cry shouts out loudly and increases all party members' defense by 50%. That's really good for 5 seconds, and taunts all enemies. I haven't seen the animation on how big of a range that is, but I believe it's actually pretty decent. So it's all party members. So I believe that it's just going to immediately proc 50% defense for everyone. I don't know if it's actually a range like Veronica or something like that. And then lastly, the special ability, it takes damage for party members with HP lower than 50% within 5 tiles, and then activate only when crazy HP is higher than 50%. So that's a really amazing special ability. There's surprisingly tanky teams out there that still use Craig. This is just a legitimately good character. It's not like, oh, he's good for a 2-star. He's still legitimately a very good character, and is a really efficient build path to go if you happen to have a unique 3-star Earth character, like in Mayriel, Tinia, or Bari, that you can really base an account around, and then you'll be able to have a really good tank to level up as well. And then he has the party skill of 44% defense, a really high defense increase there. And then the silence, his exclusive weapon is actually pretty sweet too. And this is one of the few exclusive weapons I've seen like splashed around. Like Marinas were using this and stuff like that as a counter to other Marinas in the mirror match back when they were meta. But when hit by melee attacks, inflicts 20% of DPS damage to the attacker and restores 1% HP. The damage increases in proportion to the defense, so it makes the modifier a defensive modifier, which I think is actually pretty cool. And it also makes sense why Marinas were using it, because she has this weird outlier of just like crazy amount of stats. Like her defensive stats, like if you look at a graph on just how big of a statistical outlier she is, it's just, she's way up here. So it makes sense why people are running this on Marina. And then has a really low percentage DPS, but who cares, it's a tank character, and then rushes quickly to target and damage everything nearby, and then the damage is increases in proportion to defense of the attacker, and then puts enemies in downstate. So another really good tank character. I think those are the 5 that are worth mentioning here. Yes, so there's other tanks. I almost want to kind of, as a honorable mention, mention Beth as a tank, and I use her a lot in Camazon Zone, and she's kind of like a pseudo tank in the sense that, let me read her passive just so I don't mess it up, but her exclusive weapon makes it to when she does damage, she gets a shield, so she's kind of like a damaging tank, and then the more enemies she has around her in Battle Instinct, the passive is, and depending on the number of enemies within 3 tiles, attack increases by 15% and then up to 60%, and then negates incoming damage by 15% up to 60%. So that right there is essentially like, she's like a pseudo tank in the sense that she's doing damage to survive. So she needs to be doing a ton of damage, and it needs to have a lot of enemies around her. So this is more so in PvE content, like hard PvE content. You can kind of consider like a pseudo tank there. And then there's also the Veronica cheese for Camazone, where any time that there's a lot of weapon region speed that you can get on either benefits, exclusive weapons, or artifacts in the Camazone, you can make her like crazy tanky based on her passive. So kind of hilarious, and so I believe she also deserves a honorable mention. She caused massive changes in the Camazone because of that passive, and people figuring that out. So kind of funny, but that should do it for this video when it comes to the best 5 tanks here in Guardian Tales. Hopefully this, change up in scenery wasn't too distracting. And with that, guys, I'm out. Peace.